9 Golden Age actors who ruined their careers and lost everything. The golden light of Hollywood stardom can illuminate with blinding intensity and vanish just as suddenly, leaving darkness and ruin in its wake. For every success story from cinema's golden age, there's a cautionary tale of spectacular collapse. Careers that didn't gradually fade, but imploded dramatically, leaving behind the wreckage of wasted talent, squandered fortunes, and shattered lives. Hollywood has always been a factory that manufactures dreams, explained a veteran studio executive who witnessed several of these downfalls firsthand. But what people forget is that it's equally efficient at manufacturing nightmares for those who can't navigate its treacherous waters. What makes these particular stories so compelling isn't just the height from which these stars fell, though many commanded salaries equivalent to millions in today's dollars, but the speed and totality of their destruction. These weren't careers that simply cooled, they were reputations that combusted, bank accounts that evaporated, and lives that unraveled in full public view. The studio system could build you up higher than anyone had ever climbed, noted a film historian specializing in Hollywood's golden age. But if you crossed the wrong people, violated the wrong moral codes, or simply lost control of your personal demons, that same system could destroy you with terrifying efficiency. Most shocking are the financial realities behind these falls. Stars who once commanded thousands per week died penniless. Actors whose names topped marquees finished their lives in obscurity, sometimes working under assumed names just to survive. And several met ends so tragic they became cautionary legends in an industry already rife with superstition. What's particularly heartbreaking is how many were victims of systems beyond their control, observed a biographer who has chronicled several of these fallen stars. Some were destroyed by studio-fostered addictions, others by impossible moral standards they could never hope to satisfy, and still others by their own inability to handle fame that came too fast and burned too bright. Today, we're exploring 9 of the most dramatic career implosions from Hollywood's golden age, from the silent film superstar who went from commanding $1 million per year to working under a pseudonym after a scandal destroyed his reputation, to the actress whose tragic end at the Hollywood sign created one of the industry's most enduring legends. But we begin with the story that established the template for all Hollywood scandals that followed, a case that demonstrated just how quickly public adoration could transform into merciless destruction. Fatty Arbuckle, the first star to fall. In 1921, Roscoe "Fatty" Arbuckle was cinema's highest-paid star, having just signed a contract with Paramount for $1 million annually, equivalent to over $14 million today. His gentle, athletic comedy had made him one of the most beloved figures in Hollywood, a mentor to Charlie Chaplin and Buster Keaton, and a true pioneer of film comedy. 3 days in September of that year would destroy everything he had built. From $3 million a year to working under a fake name, remarked a film historian who studied Arbuckle's case extensively. No Hollywood fall has ever been more complete or more unjust. The catalyst was a wild Labor Day party at San Francisco's St. Francis Hotel, where a young actress named Virginia Rapp became seriously ill and died days later of peritonitis caused by a ruptured bladder. Though medical evidence suggested a pre-existing condition, moral crusaders and yellow journalists quickly constructed a lurid narrative. Arbuckle had allegedly crushed the young woman beneath his considerable weight during a sexual assault. The headlines were immediate and devastating. William Randolph Hearst's newspaper empire discovered that Arbuckle's stories increased circulation, leading to increasingly sensationalized coverage. Facts became irrelevant in the rush to judgment. They claimed he violated her with a Coca-Cola bottle, that he crushed her under his enormous weight, none of which was supported by any evidence, explained the historian. But moral crusaders had been looking for a way to attack Hollywood, and Arbuckle became their perfect target. Arbuckle endured 3 trials. The first 2 ended with hung juries, and the third resulted in a complete acquittal after the jury deliberated for just 6 minutes. They even took the extraordinary step of issuing a formal apology. Acquittal is not enough for Roscoe Arbuckle. We feel a great injustice has been done him. There was not the slightest proof adduced to connect him in any way with the commission of a crime. But the legal victory came too late. The newly appointed head of the Motion Picture Producers and Distributors of America, Will Hayes, had already banned Arbuckle's films and his name from American screens. Though Hayes eventually lifted the ban, theater owners refused to show Arbuckle's work, fearing public backlash. He was the first victim of what we'd now call cancel culture, noted an entertainment lawyer who studied the case's legal implications. Arbuckle was completely innocent, but the industry sacrificed him to protect itself from moral reformers who were threatening government censorship of all films. The financial impact was immediate and catastrophic. Paramount was forced to shelve films worth millions. Arbuckle's career earnings evaporated in legal fees and living expenses. By the mid-1920s, he was effectively bankrupt despite having been one of the wealthiest entertainers in America just years earlier. Desperate to work, Arbuckle began directing under the pseudonym William Goodrich. His talent still valuable, but his name toxic. Friends like Buster Keaton tried to help, but the industry that had made Arbuckle wealthy had permanently turned against him. He experienced a brief comeback in 1933 when Warner Brothers signed him to make comedy shorts, potentially presaging a full return to the screen. The night after signing this contract, Arbuckle died of a heart attack in his sleep. He was 46 years old. His last words to his wife were, "This is the best day of my life," said the historian. After a decade of being treated as a pariah, he finally thought he was being welcomed back, only to die before his redemption could begin. Arbuckle's destruction established a pattern that would repeat throughout Hollywood history, a moral panic amplified by yellow journalism, leading to the complete annihilation of a career regardless of facts or legal outcomes. But while Arbuckle's downfall came from external forces, our next subject's destruction came primarily from within, fueled by a studio system that valued profit over human welfare.
It really was no miracle. What happened was just this. The wind began to switch, the house to pitch. Next year all our troubles will be miles away.
Judy Garland, the star who couldn't escape the system. When 13-year-old Frances Gumm, soon to be renamed Judy Garland, signed with MGM in 1935, she entered a system that would simultaneously make her one of the world's most beloved performers and systematically destroy her health, stability, and financial security. She couldn't escape the system, or the pills it gave her, observed a biographer who chronicled Garland's tragic trajectory. MGM created Judy Garland the star, but in the process, it broke Judy Garland the person. The studio's treatment of the young performer set the stage for decades of struggle. Concerned about her weight, executives put the teenager on a regimen of diet pills, amphetamines to suppress her appetite during the day, and barbiturates to help her sleep at night. This studio-mandated introduction to pharmaceuticals began a lifelong pattern of substance dependency. They were literally giving speed to a child, explained the biographer, and not occasionally, daily, for years, during critical developmental periods. The studio doctors prescribed it, studio executives enforced it, and her own mother collaborated with the system. She never had a chance. By the time Garland starred in The Wizard of Oz at 16, she was already dependent on the uppers and downers cycle that would plague her for life. The studio worked her relentlessly, often filming one project during the day while rehearsing another at night, with pills provided to manage her energy levels during punishing 18-hour workdays. As Garland matured, her relationship with MGM deteriorated. Increasingly unreliable on set due to her addiction issues, she began missing days of shooting. Productions ran over budget. Her behavior became erratic, a direct consequence of the very substances the studio had introduced to her system. In 1950, MGM finally terminated her contract after she had worked for them for 15 years, a decision that devastated Garland both emotionally and financially. Though she had made the studio millions, years of financial mismanagement and contractual disadvantages left her with serious tax problems. MGM darling turned tragic cautionary tale, noted a film historian who specialized in the studio system's treatment of female stars. She went from being the studio's reliable workhorse to being labeled unreliable and difficult, labels that ignored how the studio itself had created the conditions for her struggles. The pattern repeated throughout her remaining years. Concert promoters, television executives, and film producers would hire Garland for her extraordinary talent, then fire her when the addiction issues she couldn't control interfered with production. Each firing reinforced her insecurities, intensified her dependency, and further damaged her reputation. Fired from multiple studios, financially ruined despite global fame, the historian continued. By the 1960s, the same industry that had exploited her as a child was treating her as a liability. Her legal and tax problems had become so severe that she was essentially working to pay off debts rather than build security. In her final years, Garland's financial situation became dire. She was evicted from hotels for unpaid bills. Her performances became increasingly unreliable, sometimes brilliant, other times disastrous. At the time of her death from an accidental overdose in 1969, she was effectively bankrupt, despite having earned millions throughout her career. She died with less than $1,000 to her name, revealed her biographer, and owed hundreds of thousands in back taxes. The system used her up, addicted her, exploited her extraordinary talent, then discarded her when the damage they'd inflicted made her too unreliable. Garland's story represents the darkest aspects of the studio system, how it could identify extraordinary talent, elevate it to global fame, while simultaneously destroying the human being behind the talent through exploitation and chemical management. While her destruction came through institutional abuse, our next subject's downfall began with a single, devastating moment that transformed a promising career into a tragic spiral.
Yes, I do. I understand. I understand very well. He asked for it. The Army's gonna get you sooner or later, Fatso. But before they do, I want a piece of you myself.
Montgomery Clift, beauty destroyed, genius derailed. On May 12, 1956, Montgomery Clift left a dinner party at Elizabeth Taylor's home. Driving down a winding Los Angeles road, he crashed his car into a telephone pole, resulting in facial injuries that would permanently alter both his appearance and his career trajectory. Hollywood watched a genius disappear in slow motion, remarked a director who worked with Clift both before and after the accident. The crash was just the beginning of a decade-long collapse that transformed one of our most brilliant actors into a shell of himself. Prior to the accident, Clift had represented a new kind of male star, sensitive, vulnerable, emotionally complex, a stark contrast to the more stoic leading men who had dominated Hollywood. Films like Red River, A Place in the Sun, and From Here to Eternity had established him as not just a remarkable talent, but a new archetype of American masculinity on screen. The accident changed everything. Clift's face, once described as the most beautiful in cinema, was significantly altered despite pioneering plastic surgery. More devastatingly, the crash intensified his reliance on alcohol and painkillers, substances he had used before, but which now became essential crutches. Brilliant actor, but spiraled after his near-fatal car crash, noted a film historian who studied Clift's career. The physical changes were obvious, but the psychological impact was even more significant. He lost confidence in the instrument that had made him a star, himself. The visible changes in Clift's appearance created practical challenges for directors. His face now photographed differently on each side, requiring careful lighting and camera placement. More problematically, his behavior became increasingly erratic as his substance abuse intensified. Disfigurement, addiction, and self-sabotage followed, explained the historian. He would show up unprepared, forget lines, and sometimes appear visibly intoxicated on set. The consummate professional became increasingly unreliable. The industry's response was predictably callous. While a few loyal directors like Fred Zinnemann continued to work with Clift, recognizing his genius despite his struggles, many simply deemed him too risky for major investments. Insurance companies began requiring special bonds for productions featuring Clift, an additional cost that made studios hesitant to cast him. Directors stopped calling, friends watched him unravel, said a costume designer who knew Clift in his final years. It wasn't just that his appearance had changed, his entire essence seemed altered by a combination of pain, medication, alcohol, and the psychological trauma of watching his own decline. By the mid-1960s, Clift's career had dwindled to occasional supporting roles. His final film, The Defector, 1966, showed glimpses of his former brilliance, but was a far cry from the starring vehicles of his early career. On July 23, 1966, he died alone in his New York townhouse from a heart attack at age 45. The tragedy of Monty was that his genius remained intact even as everything else fell apart, observed the director. You could still see moments of the old magic in his later performances, brief windows where he'd break through the fog of addiction and pain. But those moments became increasingly rare. Clift's story represents how quickly fortune can reverse in Hollywood, how a single accident can transform a trajectory from ascent to decline. While his downfall began with an external catastrophe, our next subject's destruction came primarily from within, as personal demons gradually consumed one of Hollywood's most reliable leading men.
That's where the popcorn business comes in. You buy yourself a bag and plug up your...
Kid, I'll show you a step I learned in L.A. Now watch this. First, you gotta set the rhythm.
William Holden, the golden boy who lost his shine. In the 1950s, William Holden embodied Hollywood's ideal of rugged yet sophisticated masculinity. Films like Sunset Boulevard, Stalag 17, which won him an Academy Award, and The Bridge on the River Kwai established him as one of the industry's most bankable stars, handsome, talented, and professional. But beneath the polished exterior lurked a growing dependence on alcohol that would eventually destroy both his career and his life. Academy Award winner, noted a producer who worked with Holden during both his prime years and later decline. But the same man who could command any role in the 1950s became increasingly unemployable by the 1970s. Alcohol didn't just damage his career, it erased it. Holden's drinking had been present throughout his early success, but remained manageable enough to allow for consistent work. As he aged, however, the problem intensified. His legendary professionalism began to slip. Stories of drunken behavior on set, missed cues, and forgotten lines became more common. Succumbed to alcoholism in his later years, explained a co-star from one of Holden's final films. What made it particularly sad was how aware he was of his own decline. Unlike some alcoholics who remain in denial, Bill knew exactly what he was doing to himself and his career, but seemed powerless to stop it. The physical toll became increasingly visible. Holden's once handsome face showed the ravages of heavy drinking, bloated, reddened, aged beyond his years. Directors who had once highlighted his leading man looks now struggled to light him flatteringly. By the 1970s, his career had largely transitioned to supporting roles and television work, a significant step down for an actor who had once commanded top billing. While he experienced a brief resurgence with films like Network, 1976, these successes proved temporary rather than a genuine comeback. Career faded, and he died alone after a drunken fall, said the producer. The circumstances of his death were as tragic as they were preventable, the final act in a slow-motion self-destruction that had played out over decades. On November 12, 1981, Holden, intoxicated in his Santa Monica apartment, slipped and struck his head on a bedside table. Rather than calling for help, he seemed to have attempted to treat the wound himself. He bled to death slowly, his body not discovered until days later. He fell off the pedestal, and no one caught him, observed a friend who had known Holden for decades. Bill had isolated himself to the point where no one was checking on him regularly. The man whose face had once been recognized worldwide died utterly alone. The coroner estimated that Holden could have survived the injury had he sought medical attention. Instead, alcohol had impaired his judgment during a crisis that became his last. At 63, one of Hollywood's most successful leading men died needlessly in circumstances that highlighted how far he had fallen from his former glory. Holden's destruction through alcoholism represents a common pattern in Hollywood downfalls. Talent and opportunity gradually undermined by substance abuse that eventually renders even the most bankable star unemployable. While his decline occurred gradually over decades, our next subject experienced a more concentrated destruction, fueled by typecast frustration and industry limitations.
Fights a never-ending battle for truth, justice, and the American way. And now, another exciting episode. Tall buildings at a single bound. Look, up in the sky, it's a bird.
It's a plane!
It's Superman!
George Reeves, When Superman Couldn't Fly. George Reeves achieved what many actors dream of, an iconic role that brought him into millions of homes and made him instantly recognizable worldwide. As Superman in the 1950s television series Adventures of Superman, he became a hero to countless children and a household name throughout America. That same role would become his prison, eventually contributing to his tragic end. He played a hero, but Hollywood made him powerless, observed a television historian who studied Reeves's career. The Superman role that made him famous also made it impossible for him to be taken seriously in other parts. He became trapped in a career dead end with no escape. Before landing the Superman role, Reeves had been building a respectable, if not spectacular, film career, including a small but memorable role in Gone with the Wind. Television, still considered vastly inferior to film in the 1950s, was initially just another job, but one that would come to define and ultimately destroy him. Superman on TV, but typecast and broke, explained a former colleague who knew Reeves during his final years. The show made him famous, but not wealthy. The producers paid him a modest salary, knowing he had few other options once he became associated with the character. The financial reality of Reeves's situation proved increasingly frustrating. While recognized everywhere he went, he struggled to convert this fame into financial security. The show's producers exploited his limited options, knowing that his Superman image made him unhireable for many dramatic roles. Suffered from depression, stalled career, and public ridicule, said the historian. Children would approach him expecting him to actually have Superman's powers. Studio executives would laugh him out of offices when he sought serious roles. He was caught in an impossible situation, famous as a character he couldn't escape. By 1959, Reeves's depression had deepened significantly. Though Adventures of Superman had been renewed for another season, he saw only more of the same ahead: continued typecasting, limited creative opportunities, and financial arrangements that benefited everyone except him. On June 16, 1959, during a late-night gathering at his Benedict Canyon home, Reeves went upstairs, apparently to sleep. A gunshot rang out. He was found dead from a gunshot wound to the head, ruled a self-death though. Conspiracy theories about murder have persisted for decades. Died in 1959 under mysterious circumstances, noted the historian. Whether it was self-death as officially ruled or something more sinister as some have suggested, the undeniable reality is that Reeves died broke, frustrated, and trapped in a career that had become a dead end because of a role that made him famous. The irony of Reeves's situation remains one of Hollywood's most poignant paradoxes, achieving a level of fame and recognition most actors only dream of, while simultaneously watching that fame destroy any hope for the serious acting career he actually wanted. His story demonstrates how even success in Hollywood can become a trap from which escape seems impossible. While Reeves's destruction came from career limitations, our next subject's downfall emerged from the volatile combination of personal scandals and professional limitations placed on a talented but troubled Latin American star.
That beautiful profile of yours and throw it right back in your kisser. Now, wait a minute, Carmen, you can't do that. Oh.
Lupe Velez, the Mexican Spitfire's dramatic final act. In the 1920s and 30s, Lupe Velez broke barriers as one of Hollywood's first successful Latin American actresses. Known for her fiery personality both on and off screen, she built a significant career in both silent and sound films, later finding her niche in the popular Mexican Spitfire comedy series. But behind the vivacious public persona lay a volatile private life that would eventually overshadow her professional accomplishments and lead to one of Hollywood's most sensationalized tragedies. Mexican starlet with a booming career in the 1930s, noted a film historian specializing in Latin American contributions to early Hollywood. Velez had genuine talent and charisma that allowed her to transition successfully from silence to talkies, an achievement that eluded many much bigger stars. As her career progressed, however, Velez's personal life began generating more attention than her professional work. Her tempestuous 5-year marriage to actor Johnny Weissmuller featured public fights, dramatic separations, and equally dramatic reconciliations. Her subsequent relationships followed similar patterns, creating an image of instability that began affecting her professional opportunities. Public meltdowns, studio clashes, and a scandalous pregnancy ended her run, explained the historian. Studios in the 1930s and 40s expected a certain public image from their female stars. Velez's refusal or inability to maintain that image made her increasingly problematic for the publicity departments that controlled Hollywood careers. By 1944, Velez found herself in a difficult situation both personally and professionally. Pregnant by a young actor named Harold Ramond, who reportedly refused to marry her, she faced the prospect of single motherhood in an era when that status carried significant social stigma, particularly for a Catholic woman from a traditional Mexican background. On December 14, 1944, Velez arranged her bedroom with flowers and candles, wrote a death note, and took an overdose of sleeping pills. According to official accounts, she was found the next morning in her bed. However, salacious and largely debunked accounts claiming she was found in her bathroom created an urban legend that overshadowed the genuine tragedy of her death. Died in a dramatic fashion that became tabloid legend, said the historian. The fabricated story about her being found in the bathroom has unfortunately overshadowed the real circumstances of her death. This sensationalism continued the pattern of her entire career, her genuine talent overshadowed by drama and scandal. The treatment of Vélez's death by the press and Hollywood community revealed the double standards applied to Latin American stars versus their white counterparts. While white actresses who encountered personal difficulties often received support and second chances, Vélez's troubles were treated as confirmation of stereotypes about fiery Latina temperament. The headlines outlived the talent, observed a cultural critic who has written about Hollywood's treatment of minority performers. Vélez pioneered paths for Latin American actresses in Hollywood, but her legacy was reduced to tabloid fodder. The industry that had profited from her Mexican Spitfire image showed little compassion when real-life troubles overtook her. Vélez's story represents how quickly Hollywood could abandon talent when personal scandals became more prominent than professional accomplishments, particularly for stars who didn't fit the industry's preferred demographic profile. While her destruction came partially from external prejudices, our next subject's downfall was largely self-inflicted through behavior that eventually made him uninsurable and unemployable.
And what do you propose to do?
I'll organize revolt.
Yes, this feminine interest is surprising.
Well, personally, I've had enough feminine interest for today. You don't mind.
Errol Flynn, the swashbuckler who swashbuckled too hard. No actor embodied Hollywood adventure more completely than Errol Flynn. With films like Captain Blood and The Adventures of Robin Hood, he defined the swashbuckling hero for generations of moviegoers. Handsome, athletic, and charismatic, Flynn seemed destined for a long reign as one of Warner Brothers' most valuable stars. Instead, his off-screen behavior created a template for self-destruction that many Hollywood bad boys would follow in subsequent decades. Swashbuckling star with a massive ego and bigger scandals, observed a film historian who studied Flynn's meteoric rise and fall. Flynn lived as recklessly off-screen as his characters did on-screen. The difference was that movie heroes always survived their adventures intact. Flynn wouldn't be so fortunate. The first major blow to Flynn's career came in 1942, when two underage girls accused him of statutory assault. Though he was ultimately acquitted after highly publicized trials, the proceedings revealed aspects of his private life that damaged his heroic image. The phrase "in like Flynn" entered the American lexicon as shorthand for sexual success, but the association with scandal permanently tainted his professional standing. Accused of statutory assault, constant drinking, legal issues, noted the historian, while the acquittal allowed him to continue working, the wholesome family audience that had been his core fan base was now problematic. Parents who had once encouraged their children to admire Flynn now had reservations about his character. As his career continued through the 1940s, Flynn's alcoholism and general dissipation became increasingly visible on screen. The handsome, athletic star of the 1930s began showing visible signs of hard living. Warner Brothers found it increasingly difficult to cast him in the action roles that had made him famous as his physical condition deteriorated. By the early 1950s, Flynn was essentially unemployable in major productions. Health problems related to his drinking and lifestyle made him uninsurable for action sequences. His unreliability on set, missed days, forgotten lines, visible intoxication made him a significant liability for any production. He lived too fast, and Hollywood let him crash, explained a film producer who knew Flynn in his later years. The studios enabled his behavior when he was making the money, looking the other way as he drank and caroused. When those same behaviors made him unprofitable, they discarded him without a second thought. Flynn's final years were spent in increasingly desperate circumstances. Despite having earned millions, financial mismanagement and tax problems left him nearly broke. His physical appearance deteriorated dramatically, with the once dashing star becoming bloated and unhealthy looking. On October 14, 1959, Flynn died of a heart attack in Vancouver while trying to sell his yacht to cover his debts. He was just 50 years old, but looked decades older. Medical examiners reported that his body showed signs of significant liver damage, multiple heart problems, and other conditions usually associated with much older men. Died broke, bloated, and disgraced, summarized the historian. The man whose name had once been synonymous with heroic adventure and physical prowess died with the body of an elderly man, virtually penniless, despite having commanded top salaries for years. Flynn's self-destruction represents how completely substance abuse and reckless behavior can derail even the most promising Hollywood career. While his downfall played out over decades, our next subject's professional destruction came through a similar vehicle, alcohol, but with different manifestations in a very different personality type.
The detective who wades in with his fists where others fear to tread.
You don't hate hoodlums. You like to beat them up. You get fun out of it. You like to read about yourself in the newspapers as the tough cop.
Dana Andrews, the leading man who disappeared into a bottle. In the 1940s, Dana Andrews embodied a particular type of American masculinity. Handsome but not pretty, tough but thoughtful, capable of both action and introspection. Films like Laura, The Best Years of Our Lives, and Where the Sidewalk Ends established him as one of Hollywood's most reliable leading men, a star who could carry major productions while bringing emotional depth to conventional roles. Yet by the mid-1950s, his career had entered a steady, irreversible decline, driven primarily by his increasingly unmanageable alcoholism. Star of Laura and The Best Years of Our Lives, noted a film historian who specialized in post-war Hollywood, Andrews represented a specific moment in American cinema, the immediate post-war period when male characters were working through the psychological impacts of the war while reintegrating into civilian society. His talent for conveying internal conflict made him perfect for these roles. Andrews' drinking had been present throughout his early career, but remained manageable enough to allow for consistent professional performance. As the 1950s progressed, however, his alcoholism intensified to the point where it began visibly affecting both his appearance and reliability. Alcoholism ruined his reliability and reputation, explained the historian. Studios initially tolerated his drinking because he remained bankable, but as missed days and inconsistent performances mounted, his career options narrowed dramatically. A particularly telling incident occurred during the filming of 0 Hour, 1957, when Andrews appeared on set visibly intoxicated. After this and similar incidents, insurance companies began requiring special riders for productions featuring Andrews, significantly increasing costs for any film that cast him in a major role. Went from leading man to supporting roles to near invisibility, observed a producer who worked with Andrews in both his prime years and later decline. It wasn't just the drinking itself that damaged his career. It was the reputation for unreliability that followed him. Directors who might have worked around his alcoholism couldn't work around the insurance costs and scheduling risks. What makes Andrews' story particularly notable is how clearly he understood his own situation. Unlike some alcoholics who remain in denial, Andrews eventually recognized his problem and became one of Hollywood's earliest and most vocal advocates for alcoholism awareness and treatment. In 1972, long after his leading man days had ended, Andrews publicly acknowledged his alcoholism and became president of the National Council on Alcoholism. He spoke openly about how drinking had damaged his career and personal life, using his own experience as a cautionary tale for others in the industry. He had the look, but the bottle had him, said a director who worked with Andrews during his decline. The tragedy is that he eventually got sober and could have had a career resurgence as a character actor, but by then, his professional reputation was so damaged that meaningful opportunities rarely came. Andrews continued working occasionally in television and minor film roles until the 1980s, but never regained anything approaching his former status. He died in 1992 at age 83, having spent the final decades of his life as an anti-alcoholism advocate rather than the major star he might have remained. His story represents a common Hollywood pattern: talent undone by addiction, followed by career destruction that proves irreversible even when the addiction itself is eventually overcome. While Andrews' battle with alcohol played out over decades, our next subject's career destruction occurred more suddenly, through political forces beyond her control. Gigliola Cinquetti, victim of the Hollywood blacklist. While not strictly a Golden Age Hollywood figure, Italian singer and actress Gigliola Cinquetti represents an important adjacent case, a European star whose American crossover potential was destroyed by the same forces that ruined many Hollywood careers during the Cold War: blacklisting and anti-communist hysteria. International singer and actress, noted a cultural historian specializing in transatlantic entertainment. Cinquetti was positioned for a significant American breakthrough in the early 1960s, building on her European success and the growing American interest in Italian cinema and music. After winning the Eurovision Song Contest in 1964 with Non ho l'età, I'm Not Old Enough, Cinquetti attracted attention from American record companies and film producers. Her youth, striking looks, and distinctive voice seemed perfect for crossing over to the lucrative American market, following a path similar to Sophia Loren's transition from European star to Hollywood fixture. These promising beginnings were derailed when rumors began circulating about alleged communist sympathies, accusations that were particularly damaging during the Cold War era when anti-communist sentiment remained strong in American entertainment. Lost U.S. career momentum after being blacklisted for alleged communist ties, explained the historian. Whether these allegations had any factual basis is almost irrelevant. The mere suggestion of leftist leanings was enough to make American studios and record labels immediately back away from any association. The blacklisting effectively closed the American market to Cinquetti just as her international career was gaining momentum. Planned record releases were canceled, and preliminary film discussions immediately ceased. The American branch of what could have been a global career was abruptly terminated. One rumor, one blacklist, gone, observed a music producer who worked in both European and American markets during this period. The American entertainment industry of that era operated on extreme risk aversion when it came to political controversies. It was simpler to drop a foreign artist at the first hint of potential problems than to develop their career and risk backlash. While Cinquetti maintained her European career successfully for many years afterward, the closure of the American market significantly limited her global reach and earning potential. The largest entertainment market in the world became essentially inaccessible based on unsubstantiated rumors rather than any actions or statements on her part. Faded into obscurity outside Europe, noted the historian. Americans who might have become familiar with her talent never had the opportunity because of decisions made behind closed doors by executives responding to the political climate of the time. Cinquetti's case, while less dramatic than some others on our list, represents how external forces unrelated to talent or behavior could instantly derail entertainment careers during certain historical periods. While her destruction came through political mechanisms, our next subject's devastating end came through a much more personal form of despair.
What's the matter? What's happened? Do you remember that round-robin letter we all sent each other? Yeah. Well, in that letter, one of the girls mentioned how miraculous some Swami in New York was in predicting what was going to happen to us.
So you sent me a horoscope?
Did you too? Well, he sent us 3 letters, warnings. He didn't tell my sister, Hazel. He said something terrible was going to happen to one of us.
Peg Entwistle, Hollywood's most symbolic failure. On September 16, 1932, a young woman climbed the maintenance ladder on the Hollywoodland sign that overlooked Los Angeles. She removed her coat, folded it neatly, and placed it alongside her purse. Then she climbed the workman's ladder to the top of the 50-foot-tall letter H and jumped to her death. The woman was 24-year-old actress Peg Entwistle, and her death would become perhaps the most symbolically potent career destruction in Hollywood history. Known as the Hollywood Sign Girl, explained a film historian specializing in early Hollywood tragedies. Entwistle's death transformed her from an obscure, struggling actress into a potent symbol of Hollywood's dark side, the countless dreams crushed by an industry that promises much and delivers for very few. Entwistle had arrived in Los Angeles with legitimate theatrical credentials, having established herself as a promising Broadway actress in New York. Like countless others, she came to Hollywood seeking greater fame and opportunity in the still relatively new medium of talking pictures. Only had one film, 13 Women, noted the historian. RKO signed her for a small role in what they hoped would be a significant picture, but her scenes were largely cut from the final version, and the studio chose not to extend her contract. This professional disappointment came amid personal struggles. Entwistle was living with her uncle on Beechwood Drive, in the shadow of the very sign that would become her final destination. Financial problems, romantic disappointments, and the increasingly obvious failure of her Hollywood ambitions created a perfect storm of desperation. After the studio dropped her, she jumped off the H in the Hollywood sign, said the historian. The symbolism was so perfect it almost seems invented. A failed actress literally destroying herself on the very symbol of the industry that had rejected her. A hiker found Entwistle's body 2 days after her death, along with a note that read, "I am afraid I am a coward. I am sorry for everything. If I had done this a long time ago, it would have saved a lot of pain. P.E." The cruel irony emerged a few days later. According to family accounts, a letter arrived at her uncle's home offering Entwistle a leading role in a play about a woman who commits. Whether this story is factually accurate or a later embellishment, it has become an integral part of Hollywood folklore. The notion that success was literally in the mail when despair overtook patience. Her whole career was a cautionary tale, observed the historian. While other failed actors simply returned home or found different careers, Entwistle's dramatic end transformed her into Hollywood's most potent symbol of crushed dreams and fatal disappointment. In the decades since her death, Entwistle has achieved a form of immortality she never found in life. Her name is known to millions who have never seen her sole film performance. Ghost tours visit the Hollywood sign to search for her spirit. Her brief life has inspired plays, books, and films. The woman who couldn't find success as an actress became instead a permanent symbol, the embodiment of Hollywood's darker reality behind the glitz and glamour. In death, she achieved the lasting fame that eluded her in life, though at the ultimate price. While Entwistle's story represents career destruction through personal despair, our final subject experienced a different kind of professional annihilation, one that came through the combination of personal demons and changing industry economics that left no place for a once bankable star.